Picture this. It's 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you're lying in bed doing that thing where you're not actually sleeping. You're doing math in your head. Okay, if I don't go out this weekend and I bring lunch every day next week, and that subscription I forgot about doesn't hit until the 15th, you're playing financial Tetris with your own life. Every dollar has a job, and if one piece falls wrong, the whole thing collapses. You're not broke, technically, but you're also never quite okay. And here's what's frustrating. You're doing everything right. You're working. You're trying to save. You've read the articles, watched the videos, maybe even started a budget spreadsheet that you updated twice before abandoning. But no matter how hard you grind, it feels like you're running on a treadmill that's slightly tilted uphill. You're moving, but you're not getting anywhere. Here's the thing. Most financial advice doesn't tell you. There's a specific number, a threshold, where the game fundamentally changes. And it's probably not what you think. It's not $1 million. It's not even 100,000. It's $10,000. And no, this isn't about compound interest or investment returns. Those matter eventually. But that's not why 10,000 changes everything. The real reason? It's what happens in your brain, your behavior, and your relationship with risk once you cross that line. My name is James, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, specifically about what actually moves the needle versus what just sounds good in theory. If you're someone who's tired of generic financial advice and wants to understand the psychology behind building real wealth, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if this video helps you think differently about your first 10 grand, give it a thumbs up. Before we get into the specifics, let me ask you something. When you think about saving $10,000, what comes to mind? Probably something like, okay, if I save $500 a month, that's 20 months. Or if I can do 300, that's like almost 3 years. We naturally frame it as a math problem. Save X amount, wait Y time, get Z result. Simple arithmetic. But here's what most people don't realize. The math is almost irrelevant. I mean, yes, obviously you need to put money aside. But the reason $10,000 matters isn't because of what it can earn you in a savings account. That's like $300 a year in a high-yield account. Helpful, but not life-changing. The truth is, the journey from 0 to 10,000 isn't a financial transformation. It's a psychological one. And once you understand that, you'll see why some people break through this barrier and accelerate, while others stay stuck in the same loop for years. What's actually happening when you save your first 10 grand is that you're fundamentally rewiring how you think about money, risk, and yourself. Think about it this way. Imagine you're pushing a boulder up a hill, a really steep hill. For the first part of the climb, every inch is agony. You're straining, sweating, using every ounce of energy just to keep the thing from rolling backward. That's what saving money feels like when you have nothing. Every dollar you save is a dollar you're fighting to keep. One unexpected expense. A car repair, a medical bill, a family emergency, and the boulder rolls right back down. You have to start over. But here's what happens at $10,000. You reach a ledge. The hill flattens out. The boulder isn't trying to crush you anymore. You can catch your breath. You can look around. And when you start pushing again, you're not fighting gravity. You're working with momentum. That ledge, that's what I call the stability threshold. And getting there changes everything. Let's talk about what's actually happening in your brain before and after you hit that threshold. Here's what happens when you have little or no savings. You're operating in what psychologists call scarcity mode. Your brain is constantly monitoring for threats. It's the same system that helped our ancestors survive when food was scarce, except now it's activated by your checking account balance. And here's the kicker. Scarcity mode actively makes you worse with money. A famous study from Princeton found that financial stress can reduce cognitive function by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13 points. That's the difference between sharp and struggling to focus. When you're constantly worried about money, you literally have less mental bandwidth for everything else, including making good financial decisions. This creates what I call the survival tax. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you pay more for everything. You can't buy in bulk because you can't afford the upfront cost, so you pay more per unit. You can't wait for sales because you need things now. You can't negotiate for better deals because you're desperate. You take the first job offer instead of waiting for the right one. You keep the expensive car payment because you can't afford the down payment on something cheaper. Poverty is expensive. And it's not because people are making bad decisions. It's because their brain is literally operating in survival mode, which prioritizes short-term relief over long-term optimization. But here's where it gets interesting. Once you cross that $10,000 threshold, something shifts. Your brain starts to relax. The constant threat monitoring dials down. You start making decisions from a place of security rather than scarcity. Psychologists call this cognitive bandwidth recovery. You're not spending mental energy worrying about whether your card will decline. You're not calculating if you can afford lunch. That mental space opens up, and suddenly you start seeing opportunities you were too stressed to notice before. Now, let's run the real numbers, because this is where the math gets interesting. Not for the reasons you'd expect. Let's say you're saving $400 a month. Not nothing, but not crazy either. At that rate, it takes you 25 months to hit 10,000. That's just over 2 years. Now, most people look at that and think, okay, so in 2 years, I'll have $10,000 earning maybe 4% in a high-yield savings account. That's $400 a year in interest. Big deal. And they're right. That interest is not the point. Here's where the math gets interesting. Before you hit 10 grand, let's say your car breaks down and needs a $1,500 repair. What happens? You put it on a credit card at 22% interest, or you take out a payday loan, or you skip rent and spiral into late fees. That $1,500 problem becomes a $2,000 problem, which becomes a $3,000 problem. After you hit 10 grand, you write a check. Problem solved. No interest, no fees, no spiral. You're back to saving within a month. When you add it all up, the average American pays over $1,300 per year in credit card interest alone. Add in overdraft fees, late payment penalties, and the poverty premium of not being able to buy in bulk or wait for sales, and you're looking at $3,000 to $5,000 per year, just evaporating. That's not investment returns. That's money you stop losing once you have a buffer. Think about that. Having $10,000 saved doesn't just earn you $300 in interest. It potentially saves you $3,000 to $5,000 in costs you're currently paying without even realizing it. And this is the part that will blow your mind. At a $400 per month savings rate, that first 10 grand took you 25 months. But the next 10 grand, with all those costs eliminated and your brain operating clearly, you might hit it in 18 months. The third 10 grand, maybe 14 months. The boulder isn't just easier to push, it's actually getting lighter. Now, you might be thinking, that's great, but I can barely save $100 a month, let alone $400. This doesn't apply to me. And I hear that. I really do. But here's what's really going on. The exact number matters less than you think. If 10,000 feels impossible, aim for 5,000 or 3,000. The psychological shift starts happening well before you hit any magic number. It begins the moment you have any buffer at all. The point isn't the specific dollar amount. It's crossing from one emergency away from disaster to, I can handle a setback. That's the shift. And it compounds, not financially, but psychologically. I've seen this play out countless times. Someone saves their first 1,000 and suddenly stops stress eating, because the check engine light doesn't trigger a panic attack anymore. They sleep better. They show up to work sharper. They get a better performance review. They get a raise. And that raise makes the next 1,000 easier. The money isn't just growing. It's changing who you are. Let me paint you a picture of what this actually looks like in real life. Before 10,000, your check engine light comes on, and your stomach drops. You spend the next 3 days obsessing over worst-case scenarios, losing sleep, snapping at your partner, and Googling, how long can you drive with check engine light on? You're terrified, and you're paralyzed. After 10,000, your check engine light comes on, and you think, annoying. I'll get that looked at this weekend. You call a mechanic, schedule an appointment, and go about your day. It's a problem, but it's not a crisis. Before 10,000, your company announces layoffs, and you immediately spiral. You update your resume at midnight, you can't focus at work, and you're mentally calculating how long until you're homeless. Every interaction with your boss feels like a referendum on your survival. After 10,000, your company announces layoffs, and you think, that would suck, but I've got a few months of runway. Let me start networking just in case. You're still concerned, but you're not desperate. And ironically, that calm confidence makes you more likely to survive the cuts, or negotiate a better severance if you don't. Before 10,000, your friend invites you to a wedding in another city. You want to go, but you spend 2 weeks agonizing over whether you can afford the flight, the hotel, the gift. You either say no and feel left out, or say yes and feel guilty about the money for months afterward. After 10,000, you check your account, see that you've got the buffer, and book the trip. You enjoy yourself because you're not doing mental math at the reception. You actually experience your life instead of accounting for it. Before 10,000, a job opportunity comes up that requires relocating. It pays more, but you'd need first and last month's rent plus moving costs. You can't swing it. You stay stuck. After 10,000, you run the numbers, realize you can cover the transition, and take the leap. 6 months later, you've paid yourself back and you're ahead. But here's something most people don't talk about. This isn't just about handling emergencies. It's about negotiating power. And I mean in every area of your life. Think about what you're really saying when you have zero savings. I need this job. I need this apartment. I need this relationship to work out. I have no other option. That desperation shows. It shows in job interviews when you accept the first offer instead of negotiating. It shows in relationships when you stay too long because you can't afford to leave. It shows in every interaction where the other party has more options than you do. When you have 10,000 in the bank, you have what I call walking away money. Not enough to retire, but enough to say no. Enough to wait for the right opportunity instead of grabbing the first one. Enough to negotiate from confidence rather than desperation. And this is where it gets really interesting. People with walking away money almost never have to use it, because the confidence it gives you changes how others treat you. Your boss senses you're not desperate, so they respect you more. The car dealer senses you can walk away, so they give you a better price. Your landlord senses you have options, so they're more responsive when something breaks. Money gives you options. Options give you power. Power changes how you move through the world. That's the real return on your first 10,000, not 4% interest. Now, here's where most people mess this up. The trap I see constantly is what I call premature optimization. Someone saves $8,000 or $9,000, and they start thinking, I should invest this. It's just sitting there doing nothing. I read that index funds return 10% annually. I'm losing money by keeping it in savings. Don't do this. Your first 10,000 is not investment capital. It's infrastructure. It's the foundation that everything else gets built on. Putting your emergency fund into the stock market is like spending your fire extinguisher money on kitchen renovations. Sure, the renovation might pay off, but if there's a fire, you're in trouble. Keep your stability threshold completely liquid, completely boring, and completely untouchable. High-yield savings account, maybe a money market fund, something you can access in 24 hours with no penalties. The second pitfall is the reward trap. You hit 10,000 and you think, I did it. I deserve something nice. So you buy a new laptop, take a vacation, upgrade your apartment, and suddenly you're back at 6,000, wondering what happened. I'm not saying you have to live like a monk, but recognize what you actually earned. Security, peace of mind, negotiating power. Don't trade that for a temporary dopamine hit. The reward for hitting 10,000 is being the kind of person who has $10,000, not being the kind of person who briefly had it. This isn't just about money. It's about who you become. Here's the real transformation. You're not just saving $10,000. You're becoming the type of person who has $10,000. That sounds like a semantic trick, but it's not. When you've proven to yourself that you can delay gratification, weather setbacks, and build something from nothing, that changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's bad with money or always broke. You start seeing yourself as someone who handles their business. And identity drives behavior more than willpower ever will. You don't have to force yourself to save when saving is just what you do. You don't have to resist impulse purchases when impulse purchases are not who you are. The person driving the flashy car they can barely afford is often stressed out of their mind. The person driving the 8-year-old Honda with $10,000 in the bank, they sleep like a baby. They have options. They have peace. The goal isn't to look rich. The goal is to feel secure. And those two things are almost never found in the same place. Remember that feeling we talked about at the beginning? Lying in bed, doing math in your head, playing financial Tetris with your life? $10,000 is the number where that stops. Where money becomes a tool instead of a threat. Where you start making decisions based on what you want instead of what you're afraid of. I know where you might be right now. Maybe you've got 500 saved, or nothing at all. Maybe 10,000 feels like a distant fantasy. I get it, but your future self is counting on the decisions you make today. Not the big dramatic gestures, the small, boring, consistent ones. The packed lunch, the skipped subscription, the extra shift. None of it feels significant in the moment. But it compounds, not just financially, but psychologically. You're not just building a bank balance. You're building a new version of yourself. Start today.